Paul is consistently going to be giving you quality output, whereas John might just check out for a little while, and just be AWOL. I think that when John is at his best, the Beatles are at their best. The White Album, the Beatles White Album, or I could even call it the Beatles self-titled album. That's what it really is. This thing was released on November 22nd, 1968. Man, that means this thing's almost 60 years old. It was recorded at EMI and Trident Studios. On paper, this thing is supposedly produced by George Martin, but in reality, the album's in many ways just produced by the band themselves. They entered the studios fresh off a meditation retreat in India, where many of the songs were written. Like other Beatles albums, top charts across the world, largely well received by critics. It's the band's only double album, might be my favorite Beatles album, though that often changes depending on which album I'm listening to. Josh, I know you like the Beatles. You even put them on your list of all-time favorites, but I'm fascinated to talk to you about this because of the perspective that you're bringing to this conversation, because you haven't necessarily spent a ton of time like completely immersed and obsessed with a lot of the Beatles albums, particularly the White Album. Is that fair to say?
Definitely fair to say.
You put this on our list, though, and I don't know. I wonder when you put it on our list if you realized how long this album is. 30 songs, over an hour and a half long. I can't wait. You got to tell me, what was your experience diving into this? Were there any big surprises? Like, what was it like diving into the White Album?
Well, I had to put this on our list of albums to do because I've known that this was one of your all-time favorites. And I remember being in high school, rolling around in your Jeep Cherokee, listening to the White Album. And it was when you were trying to sell me on the Beatles, when we were first hanging out and actively listening to music. And I was like, yeah, but I don't want to listen to Love Me Do and, the first disc of the anthology album. Uh, uh, you said, oh no, I understand, but listen, we got to listen to this. So I feel like you played me the White Album from early in our hanging out and actively listening to music, and it would be a staple in your vehicle. So with that being said, I never owned this album, and I am a Beatles fan, but I would say I've not spent a lot of listening hours just sitting and listening to their albums from start to finish. So I would say your assessment is fair with what you said earlier. But so my experience now is I was very familiar with the Beatles self-titled album. Going into this, I think you asked me if I could name, or I said, let's see how many tracks I could name. And I spit off 6 or 8 right off the bat. So there's some great songs off this album. And then we have heard some of our favorite artists revere this album as something that inspired them to write great music and to record great albums. So this album has been a fixture in our listening repertoire in the last 30 years, although I've probably not spent a lot of time with it before the last 2 or 3 weeks before preparing for today.
So, for example, like if you were to throw on a song, you're not immediately, or are you going to know, like as soon as it starts and as soon as the vocals kick in, you're probably not to the point where it's like, oh, okay, this is a John song, this is a Paul song, this is a George song. Are you to that point where you feel that way, or maybe even after listening to the White Album, are you still kind of like you kind of need a reference point to know who did what on this album?
I I would say when I'm not listening to the album, if you said, "Okay, who who wrote who wrote While My Guitar Gently Weeps," I'm going to know that's a George song.
Yeah.
But while I'm listening to the album, if Piggies comes on,
Mm,
I'm not thinking who's singing,
yeah.
or probably up until 4 or 5 days ago, probably didn't know that was a George song.
So the context for this album, beyond what I just mentioned, is that they started recording this less than a year after their manager Brian Epstein died at the very young age of 32. By many accounts, particularly John, the dynamic of the band changed significantly after their manager died. By the time they're working on this album, things are incredibly tense between the band members. They're constantly fighting. It was often, though not always, the case that Paul, John, and George were in separate rooms at the studio working on their own tracks. And John said that at this point, each song was like a solo effort with the rest of the Beatles as their backing band. During the recording of this album is also when Yoko Ono becomes a constant figure at John's side, and it's a big source of tension. They were pretty much always just these guys, and when John meets Yoko, he's enthralled by her, but he also keeps him around. He keeps her around all the time, so she's a constant fixture next to him in the conversations of what's happening on the album, musical decisions, and all this stuff. She's at least there and at least present, and that causes friction. There's also the fact that John reportedly started taking heroin during the making of this album, which is likely an inspiration for a lot of the lyrics. At one point, Paul and producer George Martin get into a big shouting match, which was a very rare thing and just kind of another thing that speaks to what was going on. The legendary engineer and producer Jeff Emmerich, he quits the sessions, just walks out because of the tension and because of the bad energy that's coming. Ringo quits during the White Album, which is why Paul plays drums on a lot of the songs on this album, especially in the very beginning of the album. Like I mentioned, they'd been in India where they wrote a lot of songs there. So when they came back into the studio, they had a ton of material, and some of that material, most of the songs on this album come from that time, but it's such a fruitful time that even songs that become some of these artists like big hits when they're solo artists, like in the early 70s when the Beatles are over, and there was like some of these originated in India, and they just kept pulling from this material for a long time. With a few exceptions, this album relies on less studio experimentation than the band had been doing previously. Like it's looser, it's more stripped down. It has that sort of style more so than Revolver, or definitely like a Sergeant Pepper's, which is like relying a lot on studio tricks, which is really expanding what people thought were capable of a band to even do. And I feel like on this one, they go back a little bit more to basics. Some of that is because when they're in India, there's just an acoustic guitar. Like that's all they have. So they're not using the studio as a compositional tool. They're kind of just writing songs the way that they used to. And in some ways, I don't know if you feel this. When I'm listening to the White Album, in some ways there's something almost sinister about the White Album. I definitely used to feel that way as a kid. At times it feels like a fever dream. Like I have less of that vibe these days, but I do. There's like this otherworldly aspect of it. It's a big part of the appeal for me. But when you were listening to this, were you surprised? Was this weirder than you thought it was going to be?
No, I don't think so. I think there are bizarre moments, and I think it's definitely weird for the Beatles, judging them by their whole catalog. But I was prepared for it. I remembered the weirdness, and now I think it's less weird as I
Mm,
listen to it today. it doesn't seem as weird as it did when I was in high school.
It's easy to see it as sort of a chaotic mess of an album, but the band members were often really, really meticulous when they were searching for the right approach to each song, particularly Paul. But John has a lot of those stories too. Despite all of this, and we're going to get into it track by track here, but despite all of this, White Album's just one of the greatest albums ever made. This thing has everything from old school, like pre-war jazz, to sweeping crooner ballads, to avant-garde tape loops, to heavy rock. And I'm so excited to dive into this with you. And before we start to look at individual tracks, okay, so I'm curious, specifically looking at the White Album, which member of the Beatles had your favorite contributions? And I'll break it down for you. Let's start with Paul's contributions to the White Album. Back in the USSR, Obladi Oblada, Wild Honey Pie, Martha My Dear, Blackbird, Rocky Raccoon, Why Don't We Do It in the Road, I Will, Birthday, Mother Nature's Son, Helter Skelter, and Honey Pie. That's Paul. John has Dear Prudence, Glass Onion, The Continuing Story of Bungalow Bill, Happiness is a Warm Gun, I'm So Tired, Julia, Your Blues, Everybody's Got Something to Hide Except Me and My Monkey, Sexy Sadie, Revolution 1, Cry Baby Cry, Revolution 9. A lot of the band contributed to that, but really became John's baby. And Good Night, even though Ringo sings the lead, he wrote that song. George's 4 contributions, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Piggies, Long, 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 Savoy Truffle, and then Ringo's sole contribution is Don't Pass Me By, though he does sing lead on Good Night. Of those 4 contributors, for you, who comes away with the best body of work introduced into the White Album?
Gosh, that is so hard.
It's
And
hard.
and not only I feel like that same question could be presented for the entire Beatles catalog.
Yes.
And I feel like my answer is the same for both. It's my first inclination is I'm a Paul guy.
Mm.
I lean towards his songs um are my favorites because I feel like they're usually the most fun and upbeat, like grooviest, so I feel like they speak to me more. But then when you list the tracks and
Mm.
you list these are John's contributions, you're like, oh gosh, but those are my favorites. Like Dear Prudence and Glass Onion. I'm just like,
Yeah.
not only are those two of my favorite tracks on the White Album, those are two of my favorite Beatles songs of all time. Those are
Right.
two of my favorite songs of all time.
Yeah.
So then to say I'm a Paul guy and look at those two tracks, I'm just like, but they're these songs. So I'm just so torn. And so that would be my answer is I lean towards Paul being my favorite contributor, but it's like 1A and 1B.
Yeah. Is that kind of your answer? If I were to ask you who's your favorite Beatle, is that kind of the same? That would be your
Yeah.
response.
Well, as just like a band member or
Mm.
person or my favorite avatar, my favorite Beatle avatar, um I would definitely lean towards Paul because I'm just for all those reasons I said about his songwriting, but for his personality too, and kind of just his perception, I lean more towards that than John's. Whatever he's got going on. He seems more complicated and a
Yes.
romantic, and Paul just seems more like me, just fun, easygoing, try to not be complicated.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I know what you mean. That for the longest time when we first started playing music, the reason I picked up an instrument was because of Paul McCartney. It was because of the Beatles, but I saw that Paul played a bass, and I was just like, well, then that's what I'm gonna learn to play. And I didn't know that it would be really hard to play like Paul. That I learned that pretty quickly, but that was the reason I picked it up. I was always drawn to Paul more. He was always my favorite Beatle. And then, you get older and it becomes a much more difficult question because I find that some of those Lennon songs get into your skin. The way I look at it now is it is a kind of a 1A, 1B situation, right? And I could give you an answer and it might change tomorrow, but I do feel like Paul is consistently going to be giving you uh, quality output, whereas John might just check out for a little while, and just be AWOL. I think that when John is at his best, the Beatles are at their best. And when we talk about this album, there's a lot to the contributing aspect to it. A dude has their song and they bring it in, but then what the other people do with it is like clutch. And on that front, Paul brings the goods as a contributor to these songs, and you can hear it, right?
And that made me think of something I wanted to say to at your point earlier. Um, but first, let's not skip the 4 tracks that George contributed to
Yes,
this album, because
100%.
even though it's only 4, all 4 of his are bangers in my opinion. I
If you're
love
going for
all
batting average, like
yeah.
George, right? 4 for 4.
Right, right. All 4 of those tracks are just unbelievable.
It's a shame neither one of us gave Ringo with "Don't Pass Me By" the shout out, but I really like. Well, we'll get into
That's
it.
a
We're gonna
good
go track
song
by track.
too.
It's a
I mean,
great
that's a
song.
good song.
It's a really
So,
good song.
I know what I was gonna say. The Beatles were just on this pinnacle to
Mm.
where, you know, everything they put out was just, just sold out, set records, and people couldn't get enough. I think they just said, "Let's give the fans, who knows how long we're gonna have this, and let's document everything we can get and give it to the fans." And so I think that's why you get those weird tracks that I can't even give you the title, but I can hear it in my head. It's like "Daffodil,
Oh,
daffodil."
like you're describing it. It's like, well, he's definitely talking about Wild Honey Pie. He's
Okay,
definitely
is
talking
that
about
it?
Wild Honey Pie because that's the one that immediately comes to mind. The thing that I love about the Beatles in this period is that, and this has been the case now. I mean, by the time you get to '68, this has been true for a little while. But at some point, they just stopped playing live. They just stopped touring because the equipment to play live back then was not much. It was just like a really big amp and a really crappy sound system at whatever place that they were playing. And it didn't sound like it did today. And they couldn't hear themselves because you've seen the crowds going crazy. And so they just decide like, we're not doing that anymore. We're not going to play live or tour anymore, and we're just going to make albums and we're just going to make singles. And they were pretty militant about that. What was on the album wasn't the single, and what were singles were not on the album. And it's like in the course of this, like if they didn't stick by that, then Hey Jude probably would have been on the White Album, but no, that was a single, and then this was the album. It's just how they did things there. But that decision to pull back from playing live untethered them from being like, how are we going to pull this off live? And all of a sudden that didn't matter anymore. And you could bring in, now they had limited technology, but they figured out ways to take a 4-track recorder and cram just a godforsaken amount of tracks and horns and arrangements and all this stuff in there. And they didn't have to worry about like, how are we going to pull this off live? It didn't matter because you didn't have to do anything like that. So it really took the restraints off of them, and I think let their creativity go to this whole other place. And the interesting thing about the White Album is it's just these people maniacally working through whatever is going on with them in these little rooms, and then occasionally going around and popping their head in and seeing what's going on with this person and what am I going to lay down on this track. And there's a lot of reports of, I think Paul is going to be a lot more present on this album than a lot of the other Beatles and his contributions. John was both by a lot of reports, less likely to come in and contribute to other people's work. At the same time, the most likely to uh, feel a little offended when Paul would just wrap up a song by his own without being like, without seeking his contribution on it. So it's sort of a dual thing. Anytime you get into any of these albums, man, I guarantee you, if there are Beatles fans watching this, we're going to have a few with a lot of different opinions, a lot of different accounts of what happened and who contributed on what. Even knowing who played what on what song can sometimes get a little confusing and disputed, because it's like, even though there are records of what happened in this, it's a collage of a lot of different things going on. But without further ado, I think we can talk through a lot of this stuff by just going through the songs. We're going to start off with Back in the USSR with Paul riffing on the Beach Boys and Chuck Berry. He does play drums on this, though it's supposedly a composite of different drum tracks that also featured some Harrison and Lennon playing drums. I didn't know that. I always thought it was just Paul, and again, maybe there are disputes about that, but all three members also played bass on this track. Paul plays lead guitar. There's cool guitar work here, especially on the chorus with those like descending octaves. I think it's super cool. Great energy despite it being cobbled together. I remember once we covered this song when we played a show, and I tried to play the lead and I completely flubbed it because the bends, it's just a bunch of bends, and it just invites you to overbend and to go way high, to be like just pitchy as hell. And that's how I remember it. But it was a lot of fun to play. It's a banger when you play it live. And a really solid, a real solid way to start the album.
I love this song. I love the energy of this song. I grew up on the Beach Boys and like doo wop surfing USA Beach Boys. And so this sound is comfortable and familiar to me. And I love the energy. I love most of Paul's songs have a groove and a driving energy. And I think this is a great way to start the album.
And then we get into Dear Prudence, which is just a beautiful song. The first time we hear John's finger picking pattern that he learned from Donovan in India. It's kind of based on Travis picking. It's named after Kentucky's own Merle Travis, with alternating bass in the thumb, melody lines played on the other fingers. It's really a cool role that he has. There are all sorts of little transitions and parts that give this a lot of depth. The Prudence, referenced in the song, is Mia Farrow's sister, Prudence Farrow, who was in India, was kind of not really vibing with everything that was going on. It was really secluded. Either that or she was super into meditation. It depends like on which account you hear, but she was sequestered a lot, self-sequestered in India, and was kind of secluded. So this was a kind of an encouragement to her to come out and play. So I don't know. This is the first of John where you're seeing like, there's just a way that John Lennon writes songs that no one else writes songs, and Dear Prudence is one of the best examples of that.
This is one of the greatest songs ever written, in my opinion. I love this song. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, man. When John Lennon is at his best, it's just on a level nobody else is on. Songwriting, melody, the delivery of the vocals, it's just perfect and beautiful. I love this song.
Me too. And the way the bass comes in and backs up that descending guitar line is so good. We get into Glass Onion. You don't hear people talk about this a lot, but I've always loved this song. I've always loved this song. I bet this was one I was playing for you a lot when we were riding around. Great John song. That crunchy bass too, though. That crunchy bass sound in this, and those menacing strings. I'm guessing that most of the arrangements, not always, but a lot of times when you hear arrangements like that on Beatles songs, George Martin has a heavy hand in it, and those strings in Glass Onion are just so sick. John's having a good time playing with the overanalysis of their lyrics on previous songs, and kind of going into some of the fan theories of, the the walrus was Paul and all of these things. You heard about the Fool on the Hill. It's referencing all these previous Beatles songs and just having a good time with the idea of how people really read too much into their lyrics. But Glass Onion still hits for me.
I feel like this is one of the songs where you were like, no, you, this is the Beatles. Check this out. This is just one of my first memories of listening to a Beatles song where I'm like, "Oh my gosh, okay. This this is something different." And it's the energy, like you said, the crunchy bass, just the energy, and then all the parts. Uh, you know, as you referenced earlier with the 4-track recorder, just going crazy with strings and all the beautiful little fills in there. This song is just incredible, on my list of top songs of all time.
So we go from we have a Paul, we have two Johns, and it's very Lennon, very Lennon-esque. And then we get into Obla Di Obla Da, which is quite different from Dear Prudence or Glass Onion. And for such a light-hearted jaunt of a song, the drama and the tension that went into the recording of this song is very real. Paul was very much in a perfectionist mode here, and he would scrap. They would do a take, and they would kind of have a version of it. They would work it and work it and work it, and they would start to build on whatever take they liked, and they would build on strings and bring people in. And then he would just be like, this is not working, and then scrap it and take all those previous takes that have been put into it and just get rid of it. There's a famous anecdote about John coming in just really high and writing the intro piano part, though he was rather dismissive of this track, calling it more of Paul's granny music, which was a term that he liked to use to talk about Paul's music. Granny music comes up a lot. Also, a very famous verbal altercation between George Martin and Paul during the recording of this song. So, like, tensions were running really hot during this song. But I mean, it's probably one of the more recognizable Beatles songs. I think that you would probably get your random person off the street would probably recognize this before they would recognize a lot of the other songs on this album.
I think that's definitely fair. I think it's a very recognizable track. If I'm honest, if I'm in a hurry, I'm skipping this one. I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna move on to, so that just blows my mind when Paul has something in his head, or you know, sees something he wants to accomplish and just can't get it right, and just pours so much energy and effort into it. But obviously it worked, because like you said, it's so recognizable. Interesting track, not one of my favorites. What do you think about this song? Is this one of your?
No, it's not one of my favorites. It's. I'm kind of with you, and I don't. When I was, however old I was when I really started to absorb this album, which was, I don't know, 13, something like that, 12, 13. I kind of started with the early Beatles stuff when I was younger than that. And as I got older, I got into these more like later albums. And I probably would have said I loved this song. But now when I hear it, it's kind of perfunctory. It's like, okay, I know this is coming. And, if I forget to hit skip, then it doesn't bother me. You know what I mean? I'm not put out by it or anything, but I don't like get it amped when this one comes on.
Oh gosh, I gotta skip forward to get to Obli Da.
The funny thing is, so Paul has all these accounts of these songs now that are kind of more innocent takes than maybe some of the real story might have been. And one of his that, like, he knew this guy, and the guy would always he'd be like, "How's it going?" or whatever, and he's like, "Oh blah di, oh blah da, man." Like, he was this conga player, and it's like, and Paul was always like, "I always liked that," and so I wrote a song with that as the title. Well, that dude ended up suing Paul because he's like, "That's the thing I say, man. Like, you're just taking that and making your song." And Paul was like, "I'm not going to pay you for this." And then I don't know. There's this story. I don't know how true any of this is, but then the guy, like, has some legal problems and or has some financial problems, and Paul helps him out, and because of that, he's like, "I'm going to help you out, but would you stop suing me over obla obla da?" Like that's one of the versions of the story that I've heard. So there's, I mean, for such a like obla obla da, boy, there's a lot that goes in the backstory of that song. It sounds like a freaking movie. Um, then we get into the song that you were alluding to. Wow, Wild Honey Pie, such a bizarre track of Paul's. And I used to think this was a John song when I was young, just because it's so weird. And I didn't know that Paul had this level of weirdness in him. I love this song. People often put this at like, this is one of their least, this is like, always ranked like toward the bottom of like people's favorites. And yeah, if you're comparing it to other White Album songs, sure, it's not going to like rank high. And I remember as a kid, I was always like, I don't know about this one. It's kind of weird and almost scary. But now there's this like this groove that happens in the song. You're talking about how Paul establishes a groove. There's this sort of like really weird thing. It doesn't last that long, so it's not going to be too grating on you or whatever. I really like Wild Honey Pie. I don't know how you felt about this one.
I feel like when I listen to Honey Pie, I see the album cover of Sergeant Pepper's. Like that's
Mm.
what's going on. Those people are just crammed in a room, just like Dick Van Dyke with like the whole percussion thing just on his like on Mary Poppins, like honking the bike horn and just like the instruments at once. It's just chaos and weird, but it's fun. I'm like you. It's like, first of all, I can put on the Beatles self-titled album and just hit play and be totally fine to listen to every second of it.
Yeah.
But if I'm rolling in the car and I'm like, okay, let's just get to the highlights, I'm probably maybe skipping the weirdness of Honey Pie.
It's so weird too that there's like I was always confused as a kid because there's, later in the album you've got Honey Pie and then this one's Wild Honey Pie, and it's like there's nothing in common with either of these songs. What's the through line here? And I don't think there is one. I feel like Paul's just like, whatever, let's be cheeky here. But I used to think about that way too much to try to come up with an answer. We get into the continuing story of Bungalow Bill. And another weird one, man. Yoko's vocals are pretty easy to spot on this, though. She comes in with that one line, not when he looked so weird. This story originated in India, sort of a takedown of a couple members that were in the vicinity of the Beatles on their retreat in India. Apparently, one guy in particular would go hunting for tigers and stuff, and then come back to the meditation retreat. So I feel like it's kind of having a good time at his expense, as John will do in some tracks. But this is again, I mean, we're into this, and it's like it's kind of weird, you know what I mean? It's like now I'm so used to it now, but if you imagine playing this for somebody who doesn't know anything about the Beatles, this is going to be another one that's like people are going to be like, "What are we listening to right now?"
Well, I remember you playing this for me in high school and being like, I can jump right on board with this. It's like, okay, building harmonies. It's like, this
Yeah,
isn't weird at all. I'm just jumping right in. And
yeah.
so I think this one's fun. I think it's fun how it's like building on something we think, are we going to us? Is there like a bridge or like another part? It's like, nope, jump right in. Hey, Bungalow Bill. We'll do a key change. How about a key? Everybody want to do a key change? All right,
There
key
is a key change.
change.
That's right. Yeah.
But we're not going to another part. So, but yeah, it's another weird fun one, but I can get on board with this one.
While My Guitar Gently Weeps, it's funny that maybe the greatest song on this side of the first disc is from George, who is fully coming into his own at this point. Clapton plays lead on this song famously. It may be my favorite Clapton lead work. George is just doing incredible stuff here. The heaviness of that verse and that lift in the chorus will just give you goosebumps. I feel like I think it's that going from the minor to the major, that parallel major, because I think it's like the verse is in A minor and then the chorus is in A major, and a lot of times you're going to hear someone go to the relative minor, from the relative minor to the relative major, whatever. But I love the way that the transition indulgentness really hits. Shout out to Paul for the galloping piano part and those awesome backing vocals, and the bass on this song. Like, so much of the White Album is so full and present. It's one of the coolest things about the Beatles. Like, even when they're on the White Album and they're almost solo artists doing their things, you still get these world-class songwriters serving as the backing band and contributing these little ideas. To have somebody like Paul McCartney, he didn't write the song, but he's just like, I've got a cool piano part. It's such a cool feature of the Beatles, even when you're in this phase of it, and maybe they're not as collectively writing songs together, you still get the benefit of having them in all of this stuff. And to have George come in and do this, this is one of the greatest songs. This is one of the greatest Beatles songs. This is one of the greatest songs ever written for my money. And to have it be from George, it's starting to set a trend here that will continue through Abbey Road, where like some of the strongest songs are from this guy who was always second fiddle to Lennon and McCartney. And it's really cool to hear this happen and to hear him blossom on this album as one of the strongest writers in the band.
You already know this, but a well-written song, a greatly written song is going to be a great song. It will stand on its own if you play it on acoustic guitar or play it on a piano or just sing the melody. But a great part in a great song will get a song noticed and make a song stick in people's skins.
Mm.
And so it will elevate a song and take a song to another level. We love to talk about Paul and his contributions. Whenever John or George writes something and lets him contribute, his contributions are just unbelievable. And you are so right. The piano part on When My Guitar Gently Weeps is just so recognizable, and a part that just sticks with you and just elevates the song. You're right. This While My Guitar Gently Weeps, I feel like is one of those songs that everybody wants to cover because everybody wants to play that guitar solo, and so it's been done by just guitar legends. A song that stands apart of just not just a track on the White Album is just a great accomplishment in the Beatles catalog.
If you ever want to see one of those covers of it, live covers, there's a great version of it might be a tribute to George. I can't really remember the context of it, or it might have been for the Hall of Fame, but it's like Tom Petty, Jeff Lynne, George's son, who looks just like George, is on it,
And
but
Prince.
Prince comes out. And Prince isn't even standing up there the whole time. He just comes out for the solo, comes out with his Telecaster, rips this thing to shreds, and then just tosses the guitar and walks off. And it is sick. It is, and George's son is just beaming the whole time. He loves it. It's so cool to see that cover version of it. It's one of my favorites. People don't even know that Prince can do that. A lot of people don't, but he really uses this song as an opportunity to be like, all right, here's where I'm coming from.
I have seen that performance. That was one I was thinking of when I was saying that earlier. But yeah, George is. I love what you said earlier. His contributions are, it might be seldom, but his batting average is very high.
Happiness is a Warm Gun, dude. I love this song. It's, again, so unusual. You get that finger picking pattern again, but the chord choice and the phrasing is so Lennon, almost otherworldly. It goes into these different gears. The second piece is fueled by Harrison's heavy lead. It's just so sick. That doo-wop outro is a perfect cap on this song. It's a little mini symphony under 3 minutes. Great vocals by John, supposedly about heroin. But he also saw, like, I think an ad that said happiness is a warm gun and was really taken with that idea. But yeah, I mean, it's such a short song, but I've always loved this song. As a kid, I remember I learned how to play it, but you can't play it. Like, you can't just rip this one out. You know what I mean? It's too all over the place. it's such a great performance by Lennon vocally on this that it's like you don't even want to try to do it, or you're just gonna embarrass yourself. But "Happiness Is Warm Gun" is one of my favorites on side one.
This song, it's one of those songs where it's like a cutting edge film. It just
Yeah.
like breaks the rules. It's like, wait a minute, you can't do this. You can't do all this in one song. And I think this is a good example of the White Album as a whole, of mixing genres. I think this is why we love this album so much and why it's so popular and, loved by millions all over the globe, is because it just hits so many styles and it's done so well. And like you said, you don't know, there's so much going on in the song. You don't realize John is just nailing vocals,
Mm.
singing in falsetto where it's like, you can't, if you're singing this in your car and they just brought all the sound down, you would sound like a dying pelican, in an alley somewhere, like what in the world? He's just showing off and like, showing off his songwriting prowess, but also his vocal capabilities and his musicianship. So this song, I love this song because I think this song is right in there with the weirdness, not because it just sounds sinister or bizarre, even though the lyrics are kind of sinister and
Mm.
bizarre, but this song just takes so many different twists and turns. You're like, what in the world are we still listening to the same song? So I think this song like broke rules or gave people ideas of, oh gosh, you can do this in a song if you want to.
You texted me while prepping for this album that "Martha, My Dear" was really hitting for you, and I was so happy that you said it, because it's always "Martha, My Dear" has always been one of my favorite Beatles songs. It might even be my like favorite Paul McCartney song. I've been obsessed with this song. The instrumentation, those strings, Paul's vocals, that energy in the song. This is unlike any other song that I've heard. Supposedly, Paul's the only Beatle on this song, though I have seen some credits that have Harrison attributed to guitar, but Paul plays drums on it. George Martin's arrangements are incredible here. Th- uh, it's this song that I don't know if people just aren't aware of it, if it just is kind of considered a throwaway. But I don't know. When I hear "Martha, My Dear," my brain like just lights on fire, and I get amped when I hear this. So I was really happy that you called this one out specifically when you were listening to it. Did you still feel that way after listening to this? God knows how many times.
If you only let me listen to one song from this album, if we're like, okay, we've got time for one song, which one is it? This is the one I'm picking. As a big Radiohead fan, I remember reading articles talking about their approach to songwriting and how they wanted to get away of writing four chord progression songs. And I feel like this is a perfect example, and I feel like you can see how the White Album influenced Tom York and the Greenwoods in their songwriting. This is a great example of a song where it's like, hey, we don't have to just have a chord progression with singing over it. Let's let the melody be the star and just
Mm.
let an instrument play the melody. Why does there have to be something in the background? And I love how instruments carry the song versus, I mean, instruments like wind instruments,
Yeah.
brass instruments. I love how the instruments carry the accompaniment versus a guitar or a piano.
Yeah.
We let the wind instruments carry the song, and then this back and forth between Paul's vocals and the instruments, just absolutely. And you know, we talk about great songs and greatly written songs, well written songs, and what they all have in common to me, most of or what I consider the best written songs is if I just sing the melody in my shower and it's amazing, it's it's like if you have a melody that you strip everything else away from it and all that is left is the melody, and you've still got something amazing that can just totally stand on its own. To me, that's the makings of a great song, and that's what you have with Martha My Dear. If you just, as cool as all the horn arrangements are and everything with the song is, if you just stripped it all away and just had a person and their voice singing this, it's an absolutely beautiful song.
100%. Just everything is so charming about this song, from the opening piano lick and just all the way through to the end. And it's a short song, like it doesn't drone on forever, but it really gets in there. And man, I always get so excited when Martha My Dear comes on. I never hear it out in the wild. It's always in the context of this album. I don't think it's one that people know about. I'm sure Beatles fans do, but I love it. And then I'm So Tired, classic John Lennon. He wrote this about being in India, dealing with insomnia, missing Yoko, who he didn't take on the retreat. He took his wife, Cynthia. And I think he might have regretted that. I don't know, but this is around the time when one relationship was ending and the other was starting. I love this song too. Great chorus to this song, and another incredible classic John Lennon vocal performance. I'm So Tired is being tired and kind of feeling overwhelmed is a theme that Lennon likes to revisit. But this is one of my favorite versions of that theme that he always returns to.
I think this is a recognizable melody also,
Yeah.
and a melody that stands out. I think this is one of those tracks though, uh as it gets to it, it's like, okay, I know what's coming here. Like, do I need to am I gonna go with this one, or and like I said earlier, I can go with all of them.
Yeah.
But is it one that I'm really looking forward to,
If
or
you're short on time, you might be like, okay,
yes.
yeah. Yeah, I get that. Blackbird, countless guitarists were introduced to fingerpicking when they heard Blackbird, and myself included. I'm not sure I've ever heard two guitars play it the same way. It's because while Donovan was teaching John Lennon this one specific finger roll, which is what you hear John play throughout this album. You hear him play it, and some of his solo stuff, you hear him play it on like Octopus's Garden. It's like his role that he got from Donovan. Paul was a left-handed guitarist, and Donovan said he was just kind of like poking around, but not really listening exactly to what Donovan was teaching him, and kind of found his own sort of thing, finger style. But I don't know. Okay, Paul claims a lot now that this was written as a commentary on the civil rights movement, and it very well could have been. Um, I always hear Paul talk about things like that, and I'm always like, is it though, or is that just something that you say now? I don't know, but I have no reason to think it wasn't. I think it's a beautiful song. It's meant a lot to me because I learned how to play it with my right hand with finger picking, and because of that, I didn't learn another finger picking song for years. But when I decided to, I had a base to work from, and my fingers kind of knew how to work independently, just because I learned Blackbird, and it is a beautiful song. He based part of the composition of a piece from Bach that he and George used to play as sort of like, hey, look what we can do.
Could you play this for anybody, that's over the age of 40 and them not know what this is? I
It
just
would
feel
be
like this is
astounding.
so recognizable.
Yeah.
Almost like a rite of passage for guitar playing. It's like
Hmm.
every person that learns guitar wants to learn this song, but I think this is just a absolutely beautiful arrangement. and a musical achievement. I revere this song. It's just beautiful. Like it's like anytime it comes on, you cannot. We're gonna make 2 minute. We've got 2 minutes for this. We're gonna make
Yeah.
time for this. Uh, j- just a great song.
Piggies. Here is another amazingly weird song written by George. It's a social commentary on, well, I don't know exactly what it could be the aristocracy. It could just be general greed, consumerism. I love the classical elements of this song though. That arrangement that I'm guessing George Martin pieced together. The strings really make this song, and when it kicks in, and the keyboards too. It's like when those things kick in, there's such a wickedness to this song that I love. Apparently, Charles Manson thought the same thing. He often used this song in his teachings, which, along with Helter Skelter, kind of hurt this song's legacy. But I have such a soft spot for this song. George supposedly wrote it a couple years earlier while the band was recording Revolver. This is one of those that I think people, I don't know if people have strong opinions on, if they have no opinions on, but for some reason, when I was discovering this album when I was young, this is one of those kind of delicious little songs that I was always got excited when Piggies would come on. It sounds like it's from another planet.
This is one that I didn't remember, from listening to it from years past. And but it's like it starts weird and you think, what in the world? Your first inclination is maybe to skip the track, but the more I listen, the more intrigued I am and I want to hear more. And then by the end of it, I'm like, okay, I love this song too. This is one now that I'm looking forward to as it gets closer to it. But yeah, and that's why that George's four contributions are all four of them just home runs. So I want to pause there because I felt like maybe we skipped over this. I want to tell you of George and John and Paul's contributions, which one is my favorite.
Mm,
And for George, we're jumping the gun. We haven't gotten there yet because I think almost everybody would say my guitar gently weeps, but mine is Savoy Truffle.
mm.
Dude, that song is so cool. It's
Yeah.
so groovy and funky
Oh yeah.
and I now it's like one but after Martha My Dear, it's one that I'm looking forward to. Like, I can't wait to get to the song. So that's my favorite of the George song. For John, it's it's a toss up between Happiness is a Warm Gun and Glass Onion and Dear
Mm,
Prudence. Those three songs are just all unbelievable. But I think I lean towards Glass Onion just
mm.
because that's the kind of song I gravitate towards, an
Yeah.
energetic song that's
Yeah.
groovy and has a lot of rhythm. So I'm going favorite John song is Glass Onion. Favorite Paul song, it's got to be Martha My Dear because
Yeah.
I've been raving over that one. So, which I mean, you look at Paul's contributions, you're like, that's the one you're going. We just talked about Blackbird. There's also Rocky Raccoon, Helter Skelter. I love Mother Nature's Son
Oh God.
is
Yeah.
one of my favorite songs on this
Yeah.
album. But I can't. I've got to go with Martha, My Dear. So I am extremely interested in what your favorite song of those three are.
Okay. Martha, my dear Paul, I'm with you on that. George, man, it's so hard to get away from While My Guitar Gently Weeps. It's just such a banger. That thing rips your heart out. But I have to say, and we haven't gotten to this one yet, but my appreciation for Long, Long, Long over the years has evolved something fierce. And when I was a kid, I didn't understand it. It starts off really quiet. it goes to these really weird places that I think George becomes more comfortable with. It says it like hints of like Beware of Darkness and some of his later solo stuff. And now I will just seek out Long, 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 completely separate from this album. Sometimes I'm just like in that mood, and it's not a long song, despite the title. It's there's something about it that it gets into you, and it's tough. It's like, gosh, can I really put that over? But you're right, man. Savoy Truffle's a banger. That song's so sick. Yeah. So okay, Martha, My Dear Paul. With George, I guess I'll go with Long, Long, Long. I just love that song so much. And with John, I guess I would have to go with Dear Prudence. Boy, that's hard. Because I'm just thinking about all the songs, even the songs that are wild out there, like Your Blues. Like, dude, I love that song. That song is just soupy. It is a thick, grungy, little gnarly song. But yeah, those would probably be my rankings. And it's funny too. Like we're getting into Rocky Raccoon. Like it's great. Like this is a great example of one of Paul's character-based songs. I've heard it so much that it's almost it don't like my list almost starts to be based on the things that I like. There's some that I knew for years and almost started to take them for granted, and then the other songs that would kind of start to surface and reveal themselves over time. But Rocky Raccoon was just like immediately accessible for me. You know what I mean? As a kid, I always pictured it as being full of animals. Like Rocky Raccoon is literally a raccoon. That's how it was in my head. But it's also strange in its own right too. There's a great outtake of this one on the anthology where Paul gets the giggles. Definitely recommend you like listen to that. It's hilarious. Those backing vocals towards the end of the song of Rocky Raccoon are just fantastic. So I love that one. I love this one too. But like I like that one from the jump. You know what I mean? You can put that on for a kid, and they're gonna be like, "Oh, Rocky Raccoon, sign me up."
I would have guessed your favorite John song was Dear Prudence because I feel like since the beginning of our friendship and spending time actively listening to music, you've hammered Dear Prudence over and over. You know what I just thought of? You had a Beatles book that
Yes,
had the sheet music
it's right
of
there. Yes.
every Beatles song. And I remember you giving me the book and like having Dear Prudence, like I'm like, we're gonna learn this. Like this is th- we're gonna base everything we're about. Like this is the foundation of what we're about is Dear Prudence.
Oh,
So
if
yeah,
only I could have pulled that off. I
if
still
that
have that book. I had that one, lost it, and rebought it. It's like $70, but it was like for years I had it, I lost it, and I was like, well, I got to go get another one. I can't just not have that book. But you're right, man. Happiness is a Warm Gun so good. It's like it's hard not to. That's another one that's always been sort of a guiding light for me. It's just like God, it's such a great song.
I feel like
Um,
that's a songwriter's song because
yeah,
it's like, oh, okay, here's here's things that I'm allowed to do because this song does it.
right. It breaks rules. I tell
Yeah.
you what doesn't break rules, but has a great groove is "Don't Pass Me By." This might be my favorite Ringo song in all the Beatles catalog. I love the fiddle in this song, heavily influenced by country, which Ringo was a big fan of country music. George Harrison visited the band and Bob Dylan, the band in Woodstock, where the band told him that their favorite song on the White Album was "Don't Pass Me By." George and John do not appear on this song. Supposedly, they ran that piano through a Leslie speaker, which is what gives it that organ sort of otherworldly feel. I love the sound of the piano in this song, but just a cool groove, man. I really enjoy this song. I've always liked it. I think it's fun. It's simple, but it fits really nicely in the rest of the album.
I totally agree. It definitely fits the vibe of this album. This sing along fun vibe that I feel like was started with Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and just like rolled into the White Album. Not that they're piggybacking off of that at all, but it just the the sing along weirdness of, uh, Wild Honey Pie and Bungalow Bill, that theme of let's write great melodies that people can sing along to and want to sing oblada. It's right into that groove of fun sing-alongs.
Why don't we do it in the road? John said that Paul did this track all by himself in another room. And even though he liked it, he said it always hurt a little bit when Paul would do that. Ringo did play drums on this song. I love the bass sound on Why Don't We Do It on the Road. John and George don't make an appearance. Again, this is kind of Paul just kind of going in and doing his thing. It's wild. Apparently, he saw some monkeys in India that inspired him to write the song. It's crazy. It's weird. There's a really cool version on the anthology, but yeah, it's this is. I feel like that, Rocky Raccoon, Don't Pass Me By, and then Why Don't We Do It on the Road. You're kind of in this little fun stretch of songs in the White Album. How do you feel about Why Don't We Do It on the Road?
I think it's brilliant. It's almost like uh I feel like it's almost like a sabotage, though. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, I think Paul does, what's it called? What's this called? 12 bar blues, 7 bar blues. What's this called?
Yeah.
Everybody's got one of those, um the blues. This is like their rules. This is like a blues song, and he's doing it. So here's the one of the greatest songwriters doing a 12 bars blues song. I think does it amazingly. Everything about it is amazing. The piano's amazing. His vocals are
His vocals.
amazing. I mean,
Yes.
Paul just nails this, and then uses silly lyrics. So it's almost like self-sabotage, like, well, this we're gonna make sure this song doesn't go anywhere because we're gonna talk about doing it in the road.
The funniest thing about Why Don't We Do It on the Road is what follows it, which is I Will. Uh, to follow Why Don't We Do It in the Road with this really pretty, innocent song, I Will. I always thought it was hilarious. Uh, and I Will's a very pretty song. The guitars sound great. George isn't on this track. John and Ringo offer some percussion, but it's primarily Paul on guitar. Just a sweet little song. I Will, I think, is sort of a classic, timeless Beatles song. What do you think when you hear this song?
I totally agree. Just sweet, another song that just fits perfectly in the context of this album.
Julia, on the other hand, I feel is almost like the anti I Will. John wrote this about his mother who had died 10 years earlier. He uses the same finger picking pattern that we've been talking about. It has this otherworldly quality that John could achieve. I mean, the song almost used to like freak me out as a kid. It's kind of, there's a menacing quality, but now I just see how amazing it is. He's the only Beatle on the song. It's the only Beatles song that John wrote and performed solo. But like a really touching song when you know the backstory of him and his mother and his relationship with his mom and all that stuff. It gives this song, which already feels pretty weighty, gives it this whole other dimension of weight. But I'm curious, you may not have even had a frame of reference for any of that. So when you hear Julia, what are you hearing?
I'm learning things for the first time. Uh, yeah, I don't know that I really gave it its own thought. It's just, okay, here's another track. I don't think I'd really read into it. This is one of those that's like lost in between the tracks for me.
Yeah. Then we get to the next side of the album. We're here on side 3, Birthday. This is one of the few songs here. Supposedly, if you listen to Paul, this is pretty much equal parts Paul and John. Paul takes the lead vocals on it, though. George Martin's assistant, Chris Thomas, said it was mostly a Paul song. By all accounts, it was essentially made up on the spot. Lennon later called it a piece of garbage. That's not surprising, considering how many Beatles songs John later dismissed. Any strong thoughts on Birthday, one way or the other?
No. Um No, nothing really strong.
No.
But I feel like there's a couple of songs on the White Album, Birthday being one of them, where I've heard other recordings where it's done differently, where it's
Mm.
done faster. Oh, I know, Revolution, I feel like,
Oh,
is
yeah.
another track where I've
Yeah.
heard a recorded version where I'm like, I feel like I've heard this done
And it's
differently.
different. Yeah, for sure. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with Your Blues, but dude, for my
Yes,
money, we
I
are
love
talking
this
now,
one.
baby. This is sick. This is sludgy blues song. It's so visceral and gnarly. Great guitar work. A great sound on the bass. The bass in this whole album. I just love that thick bass sound. And supposedly John is kind of having a go at all the British bands that were so heavily influenced by blues at the time. There's a great live version of this on the Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus by the Dirty Mac, which was John Lennon, Eric Clapton, Keith Richards on bass, and Mitch Mitchell, Hendrix's drummer. Just like one of the coolest super groups imaginable, doing a really cool version of this song. But Your Blues is one that I think as a kid I was always like, what's he talking about here? This sounds dangerous. And now that's the thing I love about it. I loved Your Blues.
Yeah, I think this song just jams and um I'm with you. I didn't appreciate this in high school. This was one that I didn't really remember, and now I'm just like, this is one of my favorites.
Mother Nature's Son that you mentioned earlier. Paul's the only Beatle on this one. You're starting to hear precursors of Paul's solo work. You and I love Ram. We've talked about Ram a lot. For me, this could have been off of McCartney. It could have even been off of Ram. Uh, Great brass arrangement by George Martin. Supposedly, the tension was very palpable when Lennon and Ringo walked into the studio after Paul essentially finished this song by himself, which is like a recurring theme in this. But man, what a song, Mother Nature's Son.
Yeah, this one, I totally agree. I hadn't even thought of it, but this does sound like it could be on RAM,
Yeah.
and I feel like Paul tapped into this when he recorded RAM. This is just a beautiful song. Shows off Paul's songwriting prowess, and I just this is one that I'm looking forward to when I put on this album. Can't wait to get to this song.
Interested to hear what you think about Everybody's Got Something to Hide Except Me and My Monkey. I love this energetic entry from John. I've always found that, I've always, again, the bass in this song, the bass sound in this song. Uh, Paul thinks, Paul hints that he thinks this song was about heroin. George thought it was a collection of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the guy they were going to see in India. John suggested it was about people's reaction to his relationship with Yoko. So take your pick of what this is about. I love the bass sound and George Harrison's lead work on this song, and those are the kind of the two takeaways when I hear Everybody's Got Something to Hide.
I like the energy and the rhythm, the
Yeah,
kind of like the syncopation or off time, and um, yeah, you know, I I didn't really care about lyrics, when I was younger. It was, if the music moved me, it didn't really care if the lyrics were silly or I could get behind whatever. Uh, and so that didn't really that never discouraged me from this song. I've always thought this song was groovy and cool.
yeah. It's a fun song. So getting into Sexy Sadie, um, this has always been one of my favorites. And from the first time I heard Karma Police, I always thought, oh, this is clearly a strong influence on Karma Police and Radiohead in general. I don't know why I've always heard that connection, but allegedly, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi made a pass at Mia Farrow in India, and that was really a line he crossed that John couldn't forgive. He soured on him after that, and this was supposed to be, about him and the transgression, but the band kind of convinced him to maybe back off of that and retitle it. Love the guitar work on the outro to this song. That those bends, it just sounds so thick. There were 107 takes of "Sexy Sadie" alone in the White Album, just to give you a frame of reference of how hard it sounds. Loose and like they're just flowing in from one to the other, but they worked meticulously to get these songs down. What are your thoughts on "Sexy Sadie"?
I feel like this could be a single. I
Yeah.
mean, I feel like this, you know, I feel like this song inspired other great songs that came later, like David Bowie songs. I could see how this one gets into your skin where you're just like obsessed with it, and I have to listen to it over and over and over again because it's just such a good song.
Helter Skelter, the proto heavy rock, heavy metal Beatles tracks, or so people like to say. They worked this one really hard, recording several different takes. Paul had read about Pete Townsend talking about the Who's latest release and how heavy it was, and he wanted to flex his muscle on this front. And Helter Skelter is the result. There's a really cool version of it in the anthology that's very slow and very sort of monotonous in a hypnotic sort of way that I like too. But yeah, I mean, Helter Skelter is kind of notorious for being one of the heavier Beatles songs. But I mean, it's kind of a theme of this song of this side too, between Your Blues and Helter Skelter. What do you think? Is this one you stick around for, or is this one you're kind of like, I get it, I'm ready to move?
Oh no. I mean, we have to listen to this one. This
Yeah.
one is fun and energetic, and the frame of reference for where we're coming from. I mean, we have history with this song. I mean, when we're hanging out in high school, this is one of the first songs that I remember you ripping off on the guitar, and the first song that we're like covering as a band, in high school, learning to play instruments and be a band. It was like, all right, we're gonna play Helter Skelter. Like, I think the first time I ever came to see you guys play, you guys already had a thing going on, and it's like, I'm like, okay, all right,
Yeah.
and I'm like, and this is the Beatles. This is the Beatles. You guys told me you were gonna play a Beatles song. I'm like, I'm thinking I'm gonna sing the fifth on "Love Me Do." I'm like, are we gonna be a doo wop band? And then you guys break out Helter Skelter. I'm like, okay. So yeah, this we've got history with this song. We're not skipping this track. It still sounds just as good today as it did 30 years ago. For us 30 years ago, for other fans of this album, almost 60 years ago. Oh,
Gosh.
oh, that made me think. So you told us when this album came out. This album came out on my dad's 21st birthday.
Wow.
It was also the fifth year anniversary of John F. Kennedy's assassination.
Yeah.
So there's a little history and time frame of when this came out.
Absolutely, 1963, November 22nd. I know that date well now. It's my parents' anniversary. It's my anniversary, November 22nd.
What
Um,
in the world?
I know something's
My
going
dad
on.
was born on that day.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And yeah, I kind of forgot that we played this song. But yeah, no, dude, good call. Now I remember it very well. Long, long, long. Dude, such a beautiful, unusual song. I always felt like this had some sort of Eastern inspiration behind that riff. I don't know if that's true. The Hammond organ that Paul plays gives this an even more otherworldly feel. I feel like I've used that word a lot in this episode. But George, dude, is fully arrived at this point. I think it's one of his finest moments, not just on this album, but his entire body of work. When I first got into this album as a kid, the haunting qualities really stood out, especially on that ending that's so eerie and was apparently kind of an accident in the studio that they just ran with. John is not on this one, but I love this song. How do you feel about Long, Long, Long?
I totally agree. I think we've talked about it earlier. I said, all of George's contributions are a home run. This is no exception.
Revolution One. I think most people are, like you referenced, most people are much more familiar with the single version of this that was released with Hey Jude. It was a B side to Hey Jude Revolution, and this is Revolution One. Revolution, the single version, was much faster, more aggressive. By contrast, this is very much like a groove type of song. Even though Lennon seems to be toying with the ideas of revolution and protest, he seems sort of surprisingly critical of revolutions in general. That's my interpretation of revolutionary movements at this time. I like the song. I think it's cool how it fits into the album. I kind of think the other Beatles were right to push for a more aggressive version, I think, which is what led to the B side of Hey Jude and that version of Revolution that you're talking about. I do kind of prefer that version, but I think this is a great piece on the album to kind of kick us into the final stretch of things.
Yeah, I mean, just another amazing, well written song. Um, and whether I too prefer the more aggressive version is or aggressive, faster version, probably because that's the one we've heard as kids and commercials or movies or what have you. But I like the Revolution One version also.
Honey Pie, again, okay. One of John's most common criticisms of Paul was what he called granny music, a very Lennon sneering critique, that type of thing that he would say. At first I was like, I bet he probably felt that way about this song, but then again, he plays the guitars on this song, including the lead. But I have always loved it when Paul ventures into that classic music hall style of music. I had an affinity for this type of music before I even got into the White Album. I'm just a sucker for this sound and this type of music. And this is one of the songs where I was like, oh wow, the Beatles do this too. I mean, there's shades of this in like, when I'm 64 and stuff like that. But this is one of my favorite versions where Paul really leans into that style of music, and I love it. I don't know. I feel like this would be one in your wheelhouse too, but I don't want to speak for you.
Oh yeah, I like it too. It changes your time and space, and so
Yes.
that's fun. Most people want to hold on to things that they love when they're a child or things they're comfortable with. They don't want to see it go away. And so I you think about what time frame that was from 1968. It wasn't that far removed. Other really popular bands have done the same thing, like Blur,
Yeah.
and I think sometimes when I hear that, it's like, okay, that's kind of silly, or it sounds, it doesn't sound modern or sleek or smooth. It sounds kind of corny, but also it's charming and fun. So I like it. I'm with you. I'm a sucker for it too.
Another unexpected quirky song next is Savoy Truffle from George Harrison. This is about Eric Clapton's Sweet Tooth. If you want to take it at face value, he wanted to depart from that more mystical, mysterious, spiritual approach with this song. And dude, it's like you mentioned, this is this is a banger. A horn section in this song is just so amazing. I'm with you in your love for this song. This is your favorite? If this is your George song of the White Album?
This is my favorite George song. It's just like you said. I mean, obviously, I'm a sucker for horns and all the string arrange. I mean, there's no. I like. I love the horn arrangements in this, but I'm a sucker for all those added instruments and all the tracks on this album. But yeah, gosh, I there's something about this one that gets into me where I'm like, I've got to hear this over and over again. And it's probably where I forgot about the, when I picked this up, when started listening to this album 2 or 3 weeks ago, preparing for today, I Savoy Truffle was not on my radar at all.
Right.
Didn't remember this song at all. So it's like new and fresh to me where While My Guitar Gently Weeps is a song that's just, been with us forever. You can't escape it. It's playing at Six Flags when you're walking by trying to play the carnival games. And yeah, Savoy Truffle, just can't get enough of it.
Cry Baby Cry, I feel like John had a cluster of songs that would almost make sense if you put them on an album. And it would like include Cry Baby Cry, Sexy Sadie, probably most of his songs from the Abbey Road medley. Like so many of his songs, Lennon called it Lennon called it rubbish. But thankfully it made the cut for the White Album. I even like Paul's little coda at the end of the song too. And part of me would like to hear a fuller version of what that song would sound like. But sometimes a kernel of an idea is the best part, though. But I like this song. I think it fits nicely into the White Album, and it's kind of taking us out now at this point. This is we're ending, and I think this is a good place. This is a good position for this on the album. I don't know why John Lennon thinks it's rubbish, but he says that about a lot of songs. What are you going to do?
Kernel of an idea is a great. There's so many kernels of ideas on this
Yes.
track that are just like, sometimes they got recorded and it was just that, and sometimes it's, there's great little outros and parts and songs. And this song's a good example of that.
Revolution 9. So here we go, buddy.
Number
Uh,
9. Number
we
9.
talked we talked about this actually when we discussed Wilco's album A Ghost Is Born, because it has a similarly unlistenable track on it. uh, I know this was somewhat cutting edge at the time. At the end of the day, this was really John's baby. Supposedly Paul tried to dissuade him from putting it on the album, maybe even George too, I don't know. But it is self-indulgent. It's incredibly challenging to listen to. I never seek this track out. The best I can hope for is being in a very weird, very patient mood when I'm listening to the White Album, and I'll let it play through. But Revolution 9 is a tough hang. I can't sugarcoat it. It is what it is. It's infamous. It's there. It's on the album, and it dares you to take it on. What else can you say about Revolution 9? Do you have any strong thoughts about this?
I listened to it the other day because I was cleaning out my garage and the White Album was playing, and I'm busy and don't want to stop what I'm doing. So I let it play and I got to enjoy all the weirdness. But yeah, just what in the world are we doing here?
Sometimes people just get a little carried away, and the excesses get in there. But hey, what are you going to do? It does take us to Good Night. This was actually written by John as a lullaby for his son, Joyan, sung by Ringo, who's the only Beatle featured on this particular recording. It's a great arrangement by George Martin, I will say that, especially those ascending arpeggios. A fitting last song on an album. I've gone back and forth over the years of not liking this song to kind of seeing how beautiful it is. When you zoom out, really take the song in, I think there's something special about it. Supposedly, John sang this song beautifully, and I would have loved to have heard John's voice on this. There's speculation maybe it was just too soft for him. It wasn't what he was going for at the time. I don't know. But maybe Ringo lends an air of sweetness that is fitting to this song, as sort of an innocence and playfulness to it. I don't know. But I was curious your thoughts on Goodnight. Is this sort of it's a fine ending, or is this one where it kind of harkens back to some of like the musicals that we've talked about, and it kind of is special for you?
I don't think it's ever just click to being something special. It's just kind of all right. That's the end. That's the last one. I'm really curious that he had Ringo recorded. If it was a
Yeah.
lullaby, it's almost like I wonder if it was so private or special for his son that it's like I'm not gonna I'm only gonna sing that for my child, and I'm not gonna record it for everybody else to hear. I just wonder where the decision, where his mindset was in making that decision. But that's interesting.
So there we go, man. There's the track list. The $1 million question about this album. I certainly have an answer, but I want to know what you think. Uh, is the White Album too long? Would this album be better if it was trimmed down, or is it blasphemous to even ask such a question?
I don't see why. I mean, why trim it down? I'm
Right.
I'm I'm one of those that if some is good, then why not more? I like buffets. I like to take it all in. Give me, if I want to skip the track, what were in 68? Are they listening to vinyl? They just pick up the needle and put it on the next track. I mean, I don't know why anybody would get hung up on shoot, they gave us too much. What in the world? It's not too much for me. I like it all. I Like I said, totally fine with cleaning the garage and putting on the album and listen to every single second of it. I
Yeah.
like it all. And if I'm in a hurry and want to skip forward to just the highlights, I can do that too.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely we're not touching the White Album. The length and depth of this thing, that's a feature. It's not a bug. I think part of the point of this album is that it is a journey through it. And I'm glad that we did. I'm really glad that you picked this one. I'm glad that we did this one. This is the furthest back we've gone with any album that we've talked about thus far on the channel. This is decades before any other album that we've discussed, and I think it's a great entry point to get into everything. Just something really special. I'm going to do a real quick rapid fire here. Okay. If you have any disagreements with these three thoughts, we always talk about what sports team the Beatles, or what sports team is the band or the artist. What movie is it? Who would you want to hear cover it? Here are my three answers: 1927 Yankees,
Oh,
Murderers
wow.
Row, Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, right?
Wow.
Maybe the greatest baseball team of all time, one of the greatest sports team of all time. Movie, Godfather 2, just classic, sprawling, can be a
Just
little confusing if you've never seen it before. It's just like, what the hell are these people talking about? What's going on? But the depth of it, beautiful, one of my favorites of all time, just like the White Album. And I
also
want to hear
considered one of the greatest films of all
one of the
time.
greatest films of all time. And so it's a good parallel. And I want to hear Blur cover this album. Um, you know, why not? Right? Anything else there? Any of those that you dispute or that you want to tag on to?
I don't know. Maybe they're the 1961 Yankees instead of the 27
Mm,
Yankees. Wait,
yeah,
is was 61 Roger Maris and
Maris and Mickey
Mickey
Mantle.
Mantle?
Yeah, it was the chase for 61.
I'm just being ridiculous. No arguments there. One thing I wanted to add, you talked about the bass on
Yeah,
the White
jeez.
Album a couple of times. That was one thing. So one of our other episodes I mentioned that, you know, I just want to thank you again for making me listen to classic rock and roll. When we're hanging out going to high school together in 1997, 98, and you're making me listen to the Beatles and Led Zeppelin. And the one thing that I was not ready for was just how bouncy and groovy the bass guitar is on a lot of the Beatles records, and especially the White Album and Led Zeppelin too.
Yeah,
We're not talking about them tonight, but why not throw them out there? Because I was thinking that this music was going to be outdated and you know you know I don't know, stagnant or stale or whatever. But the bass on a lot of these classic rock albums, especially the White Album, like you mentioned earlier, is just so, you know, it may have different effects like sound crunchy or poppy or bouncy or whatever, but it always has such a groove, and the drumming and the bass work together just always gives you this groove that I was never expecting when I was first listening to this. And then today, as I go back and listen to it now, I'm just still blown away at what they achieved recording it and writing it, and just the bass work on this album is amazing.
I totally agree with that. It's every time I listen to it, I'm just like, man, how did everybody just not be like, how do we rip off the bass sound of the White Album in perpetuity after this? And maybe a lot of people have tried. But my final takeaway is just like, so many of the Beatles albums feel very curated in a beautiful way, in a way that is very much works for them, whether it's Revolver, Rubber Soul, or Sergeant Pepper's, or even Abbey Road. It feels very like a very crafted, specific thing that was decided, that there was a lot of thinking that went into what goes on this album, what doesn't. And the White Album feels like a way more unfiltered. It feels like you get the esoteric stuff, you get a little bit of madness. It goes from here to there. It's all over the place in a beautiful way, and you get an insight into the rawness of this band, but also just how diverse they were as individual songwriters, and how even one person can go between, you know, you can go between Savoy Truffle and While My Guitar Gently Weeps. I mean, even within George's 4 songs, there's a huge variety. And that's what you get with this album that makes it so special. And I feel like the reason it's probably the Beatles Desert Island disc for me is because of that, because of its breadth and because of its variety and because it's so big. You get so much when you get the White Album, in a way that if you go for another album, you're kind of getting a piece. It's like, here's a curated piece of what we are. With the White Album, it's just like, open the floodgates. Here's everything that we're about and the depths that we can go to. It's kind of everybody at their peak. I mean, it's a special album from, maybe the most special band, at least for me, of all time. And dude, I couldn't be happier that you picked this. This was so much fun.
Well,
What are your
well,
closing thoughts?
you know why I picked it, because I knew it was one of your favorite albums, and we've talked about Ween's what's it called? White
White
Onion?
Pepper.
White Pepper. White Onion. We talked about White Pepper, how it was kind of like they named it that because they thought it was kind of their perfect album. And so I've always known this was one of your favorites, and it's one of my favorites too. And so, yeah, I definitely wanted to talk about it. But you know why I think it's one of our favorites? It's because it shares a common theme with a lot of albums that we discuss. Is It's genre bending,
Mm,
it's explorative,
yeah.
it's what can we accomplish? It's finding perfect circumstances in a perfect time frame where things come together. And this is one of those albums where, um, like you said, everybody's at their songwriting prowess, which probably, and everybody's gotten so good and become, a master of their filter of sorting out what's great and what's rubbish. And so that's why, the Beatles couldn't be a band anymore, because they just, they have to they're so controlling of what they're going to accomplish. And so, that's why I think this album came together like it did, because, they're just at the peak of what they're doing. And that's why I'm glad they didn't leave any of this, excuse me, leave any of this stuff out, because
Yeah.
I think George Martin and whoever else knew. is like, hey, we don't know when we're gonna be together anymore. Let's just document it all and put it out there for our fans.
It's so true. I think that the other thing too that is like you start to have a thing when you know that you're in a band with somebody at a very high level and they're writing great songs and you're in a band with John Lennon or Paul McCartney, that it's like I got to bring my A game here, like and you're starting to see them since they're all at the height of what they're doing. They're also very aware that the other guys are going to be bringing in good stuff. And so the bar is raised and they're all kind of knowing that they're going to have to fight to get their songs on. It's a special time in music history and it's a special time for this band's history. Uh, I've loved talking about this. We're obviously going to talk about more Beatles over the course of this show at some point in the future, but this was a great one to dive into. Which contributor is the strongest for you? Leave us a comment to let us know about that. If you have enjoyed this and you've listened to the whole thing, well, then follow us, follow the podcast. If you're on YouTube and you've watched the video, then give us a like. I mean, we've been at this for well over an hour and a half here. So you got to have liked it, right? You can't just be hate watching this for an hour and a half. Give us a like. It really does help us. Subscribe to the channel and we'll keep talking about more of the music that you love. Buddy, this has been a blast. Thanks for joining me on the journey.
Honey pie, honey pie.